welcome to the Fundamentals of Lute Playing. My name is Laudon Schuett, and today I'm just going to do a short episode on extensions or stretches. I've talked about this a little bit in some previous episodes, but I thought having a separate episode that's easier to find with a few more details on how to do this comfortably would be helpful to students. Just before we dive into the episode, I'll remind everybody that I am growing my nails out for an episode on historical nails. So if I seem a little pingier than usual, if it sounds a little brighter, that's what's going on. My thumbnail just takes forever to grow. So the next few episodes will probably have this nail quality to them. So I want to talk about some of the most common problems that students run into when doing stretches or when doing extensions, and then some good solutions. I think most of the issues that arise actually come from good intentions. One of the things that we teach students in the beginning when they're first starting to play is this idea of a really good left hand position where the fingers are very curled. And everything is very nicely placed like this. Now, if you try to maintain that and then stretch, you're going to run into problems. So it's important that students understand that when they do an extension or a stretch, that we need to break the standard rules. Now, let me show you what I mean by an extension. So for example, if I were to play 1 and 4, or A and C in second position, if I were to go, that's all within second position. So anything where we skip a fret, so for example, if I were to go A, C sharp, that would be technically an extension. So I'm going like that. I've skipped this fret here. Now, what we're going to talk about today are how do we get the most out of our hands. Now, everybody has different sized hands. I had a friend in undergrad who has ginormous hands, and it was just no problem for him to do extensions. Of course, playing in smaller frets was more challenging. So there is going to be a natural limit to what you're able to do. And then the solution is we come up with musical solutions, right? You might need to shorten a note, right? Or approach it, refinger it, something like that. So if you haven't watched my video on rhetoric, that's a good video for knowing when it is appropriate to shorten a note, and that can be very helpful when dealing with big leaps. But let's say you do want to connect them. Let's say we do want a legato connection. Maybe you're playing a piece that's quite lugubrious or it's slow, and it just doesn't make sense to use a staccato articulation. So first we're going to look at this A, and let's go to D. Like this. And one of the things you're going to notice is that when I make this extension, my hand actually opens up and I play like this. And what I mean by open up is that I'm actually, instead of using the tips of my fingers like a dutiful, thoughtful student who was taught well by their teacher, it's just the way it is. It's great until we run into this situation, because if you think about it, if your fingers are curled, you can't actually stretch that far. You can't actually extend that far. And if you try, it can get quite painful. You can cause all sorts of issues on the knuckles, the back of the hand, and between the fingers. So what's really important is that if you're coming from a note and you need to get to another note and you want it to be smooth, what we want to do is we drop the finger. And you technically may be able to actually prepare that beforehand. And, it's funny. I've always, just since I was a kid, I also take the thumb off the back of the neck to give me maximum flexibility. Some of you may not find that particularly comfortable, but I find that I can even do stretches like this if I need to, which is just great. Very cool. So I do find that taking the thumb off the back for that moment, even though it can be a little scary, I find it gives me that extra, just a little bit of extra room to maneuver. So what I'm doing here is I am going A to D, and I'm opening those hands up. I should also mention, I've got a little shake in the left hand. I'm a father of 2 children now. I have a 2-month-old and a 2-year-old, and I've been hitting the coffee hard. So I'm actually pretty relaxed. There's not, I'm not tense. I've just had a lot of coffee this morning, so bear that in mind. So I'm going, here we go, A to D, And I'm going to try to give you a view, not necessarily the best technical. It's going to be a little hard on my wrist, but I think it will give you a better view of what I'm doing. So instead of having the fingers curled like this, I've got them flattened. Just like that. And if I want to go even further, that's sort of the limit for me, like that. And I'm not trying to hold both down at the same time. As soon as I reach the other and can pluck, I lift it. And the goal, I mean, with anything really, is to not have any kind of pain, to not have any kind of tension. And this, of course, can be done, let's say I'm going from here, the bass. The principle is essentially the same across strings, is that we're flattening that palm out. We may need to pop the wrist out a little bit more momentarily. So we're coming from a good hand position, like this. We're opening up, we're breaking all the rules. We're putting this finger down, and then we're coming back into a good position. Thumb is back on the back, fingers are curled and over. This last note might still be laying flat a little bit, and that's okay. We just know that when we go, let's say, to the next note, we get that pinky back into a good position. So in order to do the largest extensions, the largest stretches, we have to break some rules. We have to go outside of the bounds of what we would consider good left hand position. So we leave that, and then we go back into good position. So to sort of recap some of the things I said, in order to do a really good stretch or extend, I like to call it an extension. The reason I like to call it an extension is the word stretch to me sounds like you're working, that it's hard, and that maybe over time you'll slowly get better at it. I have not found that to be the same. I've had the same stretch capability probably since I was 11. Well, I was growing, so probably 13 or 14. But if I say extension, then what we're talking about is a type of movement that allows us to maximize the distance. Because if you just hold your hand up and you hold your fingers out like this, you'll notice the distance between 1 and 4 is actually pretty decent. And if you hold, have a little bit of bracing, you get a little extra there. Versus curled, where it's going to be like this. So that distance versus this distance, you get a ton more. So what we want to do, start in a good position, break out of the good position, extending, come back into a good position, and then the next note we play, we lift that finger and we get it into a good position as well, the pinky in this case. The other type one other thing that I think I see a lot of students run into is situations where they have to play two notes that are between other fingers. So 1 and 4 I find to be the classic sort of big stretch fingers. But let's say you've got your second finger down on the 4th course, 2nd fret. A lot of students will struggle to get the 3rd course with their 3rd finger. So let's say we're doing something like this, G to A flat, or even something like E to F. And maybe we've decided to use our 3rd finger for some reason. We're not using our 4th there. We've decided to use our 3rd. And they just find it a little hard. It's really hard to get space between these two fingers. Well, one of the other things that's very, very helpful when we're having trouble reaching something is to tilt the hand. So what I mean by that is if I pluck a note and then I tilt, I slightly lift the elbow a little bit maybe, and I angle that 3rd finger down. So I'm going, and you could start tilted as well if you don't like that feeling, but I find that it's really good to get used to just having the tip of the finger and then tilting while maintaining the note. So that note's still ringing, I'm tilting, I'm going like that. And that can be helpful even in these big extensions. You sort of angle the finger a little bit, but for that I usually find it to be overkill. But for these little, especially between 2 and 3, I find that the tilt is extremely helpful. So I'll reiterate and kind of demonstrate hopefully a little bit better here. What I'm doing is I'm plucking the note and then I'm tilting to get that 3rd finger in. I'll try to give you a slightly better angle. So let's say I've got this, and then I'm bringing the 3rd finger and I'm just tilting a little bit over there. Instead of, you could tilt like this, you could also tilt where you turn your hand a little bit. all of these things are okay. I know that that's pulling the pinky away from the fingerboard. I know that we're no longer parallel in that moment, but we're just doing it for that moment, and then we're going back into a good position. So we're playing the G here, we tilt, and then the elbow relaxes, and we're back into our standard position. So the theme of this episode is that in order to reach some things, we often need to break the rules. We need to use the elbow. We need to change the angle of the hand. We need to tilt. We need to flatten the fingers. We break the rule, and then we pop back in to standard position. So that when we're playing an advanced piece of music, we are, in a sense, just really advanced things like a terzi canzone or a terzi fantasy or something like that. You are constantly popping out of good position for a moment and then popping in, popping out, popping in. And I know we're now essentially getting beyond the fundamentals of good lute technique. But I think this is still a fundamental thing that is not often taught. Teachers teach their students a really good hand position, and then the students try to do extensions with that, and they are clearly frustrated. So experiment with this, have fun. Let me know if you have any questions in the comment section. If you feel like this video needs some further clarification, always happy to make another one and add on to it. Best way to support this channel is to subscribe. I also have my Patreon link in the description. Have fun practicing your extensions, and do remember that you can always come up with a musical solution to avoid it entirely. Almost always, even with something legato and where you want it really smoothly connected. Like I said, if you need to reposition a note, you can do that. It's absolutely fine, right? Or if it's a livelier piece, or maybe this is the long note and that's the short note. Go watch that rhetoric video. Articulus is the figure that will give you a little bit of empowerment when knowing when to do that. All right, have a wonderful week and happy luting. Bye-bye.